I think I see a couple maybe that were here yesterday, but I'm Bob Osland, part of School Exec Connect firm, assisting the school board in this very important process of selecting your next group of schools. And Patty Phillips and Aldo Sicoli, both with our firm, part of we are our team for this search and drive. I'm glad to be here. And on behalf of your school board, thank you for caring enough about this place to be part of this and showing up at the end of the day and your feedback, the feedback forms that you have, they're a very important part of this process. While it's the board's role and responsibility to make this decision, they want to know what you think about each of the candidates, and along with about half a dozen other groups or whatever that each candidate interviews with throughout the course of the day, students, staff, and so on. And so, with that, I think most of you were yesterday, but just in case you weren't, I'll introduce the candidate and then he'll tell you more about himself and kind of bring his experiences to life for you. And then we'll open up to your questions. And if you want to ask questions, raise your hand and I'll kind of go around and make sure you divvy out the questions around the room. And you can ask almost any question you want to ask. There are some that are not illegal, and we don't want to get outside the law here. So you can ask like personal, family, what's your religious persuasion, or things like that. Those are not okay. But don't worry about that. And if you happen to go down a road like that, I'll let you know gently. So, but with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Eric Schneider. And as I mentioned, Eric will tell you a bit more about himself and have your questions. So, Eric, how are you?
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. I'll just start off, just share a little bit about myself, my experiences, and what brought me here today, and then we'll open it up. So this is my 30th year in education. So going to start there. I grew up in Bloomington, Minnesota. Went to University of Minnesota as a college student. Student taught in Minneapolis, so they placed me at a high school up on the north side of Minneapolis called Patrick Henry. And at the end of my student teaching assignment, they offered me a teaching job. So I couldn't have been happier. So I started off right there in Minneapolis teaching. I taught there for 6 years, 6.5, because I went into the district office and I started working as a curriculum specialist. So I spent some time in Minneapolis at the district office working with high school and middle school English teachers. So helping with professional development. There was a new, you may recall, profile of learning. It was a performance-based assessment system that the state had adopted. So I was brought in to help English teachers and learn this system. And so that was my first kind of leadership role. They placed me, once that work concluded, they placed me at Washburn High School. So I was an assistant principal at Washburn. So I was a Miller. So I started off as a Patriot. I became a Miller. And then I had an opportunity to be a high school principal, which is what I really wanted to do. So I moved out to California with my wife, Juliet. We've been married 25 years, just had our 25th last summer. So we moved out to California. We moved to Napa Valley Unified School District. So people don't always know there's an actual town, Napa. It's not just a wine country thing. There's a city there, and in fact, there were 25,000 students in the school district, so it's a big school district. And I was the principal of Vintage High School. I'm not making it up. It's up on the north side of Napa. It had about just under 3,000 students when I was there. They've added a third high school, so it's a little bit smaller now. But I loved it. So probably 6 best years of my life. We loved the community, just a fantastic community. So I spent 6 years there. We adopted twice, so we're an adoption family. I have 2 boys that we adopted, one from the Bay Area, from a birth mom in the San Francisco Bay, and then another adoption happened in Oklahoma City. So and that son is Fort Sill Apache, so he's native. So so we're French. My wife's French. Did I mention that? And she teaches French at the high school level in Eden Prairie. And my son's native, and we spent 6 great years out in the Bay. Came back to be close to family. So that's why we landed back here. I was director of curriculum at Osseo area schools for 2 years, and then assistant superintendent in Minnetonka for 8. Right at 2019, just before COVID, I had an opportunity. I started a little consulting business, and it was becoming too much to do that and my assistant superintendent job, so I went off into the private sector. And then COVID hit, and that kind of wiped my consulting business out. But we had a company that had purchased our consulting group, and so they reassigned me to a chief academic officer job. So I was working then for the last 2 years in that role. Really focusing on dropout re-engagement, so getting kids who dropped out of high school to come back, so we partner with school districts to do that. Then there was a ed tech side to the company where we were building online courses, because during COVID, people realized that we had a lack of online, good quality online courses. So we were really busy building middle school and high school courses for the last year or so. So that gets me up to today. Right around Christmas time, just with my wife, I just said, I don't want this to be my last chapter of my career working in private sector. I really wanted to come back to public education, to public service. It's what's in my blood. And so started looking at superintendent opportunities, and this was right at the top of the list. And I'm really honored to be a finalist. It's been a great day. I've met with a lot of stakeholder groups, students and principals and district staff and what have you, so it's been a great day. It's a fabulous community. I've learned a lot about it. I've been studying a lot about not just the school district, but the town and the surrounding areas. So I don't want to say I'm an expert on Brainerd, but I've been doing my homework. So hopefully you won't stump me, but I'll be close. So I'll stop there and just go ahead and let you all kind of throw the questions at me.
Hi, Eric. Being a superintendent requires a lot of different hats. And one of the big ones is your public persona within the community. So how do you see yourself? One of the great strengths of Lynn Larson was she got out in the community right away. She got to know many people, including the business community, represented by Tyler and Kevin here. And she got that referendum passed. And I know that's all trust. It's trust the community has in the superintendent. So that's one question. And then the business side of the superintendency, having to make those tough decisions. I know that as a principal you probably had to make, but we're a small town, and you know the funding has, you know how the funding has gone. So,
so well, I'll start with the first question. And I really believe, and in my experience, it's not about just building career pathways within the school, within the academic program. You actually have to connect with businesses to create opportunities, to create internships, to be bringing businesses into the schools, to have kids going out into businesses, those environments, and I've built that kind of program. We built a phenomenal version of that when I was in Minnetonka. I did that as well when I was a high school principal. So it's not just building relationships with the business community. It's actually looking for the connection and where can we line up our course catalog at the high school level with real job opportunities out in the community. And with high school students, you have the opportunity to really make that a reality, right? And I've seen it happen. And in fact, that's a metric we used to keep track of. How many of our kids received summer internship opportunities, invitations from local businesses to serve as interns, on occasion paid internships, which is amazing for a high school student. So you have to be intentional about seeking those kind of partnerships. They have to be meaningful and authentic. But I really believe that when you build that, it is it has a number of mutual benefits, right? Because the employers in the community are looking for talented graduates, right? So, and maybe they're gonna go off to school for a little bit, but they've got the relationship with those kids, and they come back, right? So you have a pipeline of future employees when you have those relationships between the school and the business community. But what you also have is it gives business leaders and just folks who are employed in those businesses the chance to come into the schools. And it's a meaningful way to come in and interact with the students and the teachers. And when that happens, you build this kind of mutual appreciation for what each other's doing. And my experience, when you're going out to voters to ask for their support on a ballot question, if you don't have those kind of relationships between the school district and the employers, then it's very hard to get a community to support a ballot question. So it has those long-term benefits as well as the short-term. And the most important is you create real employment opportunities for your graduates, which at the end of the day is probably the most important thing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question was about
The business
making those
part.
hard decisions.
Yeah, and the second one was the public persona. How do you see getting involved?
So it's incredibly important, right? You've got to, and it really does, go back to when I was high school principal, because I had to be in the community every day. Those relationships were incredibly important to the school. And we had in the business community, in the every aspect of fundraising for the school was all about the principal going out and meeting with the people who are supporting our programs and building those relationships, because it is about that kind of trust that you establish, and the trust comes from relationships, and you have to start building those relationships immediately. So yeah, it would be being present in the community, getting to know those folks who are interested in having those relationships, and then cultivating those relationships, finding really meaningful ways for us to connect.
Thank you.
Hey Eric, Mike Stanek, parent of 3 in the district, young, 3rd, 2nd, and kindergarten at this point.
All right.
With the current political divide blending into education, how would you ensure that the uncomfortable conversations are happening? And how would you ensure that both sides, if you will, are being heard in your decision-making process?
Well, I think if you look, for example, at the masking situation, it happened this last school year. I think it's still happening. The state really put the school districts in a tough spot, right? By saying, we're not going to set an expectation. You all have to decide on your own. And that was a pretty tough spot to put school districts in, and it really created a lot of division, maybe unnecessarily. And if you look across the state, you really see, I mean, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I think as far as which had a mask mandate and which strongly recommended. So it's really all over the map. And I think if you look around Brainerd, there were a lot of districts that just strongly recommended, didn't require. So for Brainerd to be required and surrounding communities not be required, that's just throwing kindling on fire, right? So I think to your question, how do you make sure people are being heard, right? And both sides are having their voices. I think that's important. What I saw that I thought was really important, the 2 things that I saw happening this fall that I think were really important and a little bit instructive. One was districts were putting their dashboards of what the impact looked like, and I know Brainerd had that in other school districts too. Some had been doing it for a couple of years. And that's important because you have to be able to see the real numbers of how COVID is impacting kids and teachers and everybody. But the other thing that I think was really important was a lot of school districts were on a regular basis surveying their parents, right? Like sending out 2, 3, 4 question surveys. There's, okay, things are changing. How are you feeling now, right? And so when you keep your finger on the pulse of what the community is thinking and feeling and how that might be moving, because this thing's been a moving target, right? I think that's really important. I think school districts really do reflect their communities, right? And so you have to know, where does my community sit on this issue? And you may have a minority group that doesn't feel heard. But if you can lay out the survey data and say, we hear you, but there's 70% that are saying the other, they're just not here. But they've responded to the survey, in this way. That can start to help. The people can see. It's not that you're not listening, but there's a larger data sample here. It's not just the people who are talking. It's everybody who's responding to this, to these questions. So I saw a lot of districts doing that and responding accordingly based on what that survey data would say. So there are some things that I think we're helping. I'm a big believer in you've got to be surveying your community. I talked about that with folks earlier today. In Minnetonka, we had a very, very detailed end of the year survey for parents. And when we would get that data in, we'd pore over that in June to find out where did parents think we were really doing a great job, and where do they have some concerns. And those concern areas would become goals in August, and we'd start to work on them. So we wanted parents to know we were listening. We were looking at that feedback, and we were taking it very seriously. So, it's hard to capture everybody's input, but if you build a survey and you really emphasize with your community that, hey, we're going to read this really closely, and this is going to guide our goal setting for next school year, people respond to those surveys because they know results are going to come from it. And that, in my experience, that's worked.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
One of the hard questions is, Brainerd has such a good athletic program in every department. They've got all these things going on. Knowing the district's push for equity, not equality, but equity, how will you protect girls' sports from being invaded by transgender, biological men? Knowing that women fought so hard for that right to have their own sports. How do you perceive, the whole equity thing?
Well, this topic or this issue that you're talking about, this is happening right in front of us. I mean, so much of the world is changing, and I think we are all as educators, we're watching really carefully how this issue is evolving, like at the Supreme Court level. When I was an assistant principal in Minneapolis at Washburn, we had the first wave of Somali immigrants that came to the country. The first group, 2001, right? There have been several waves since then. But it was very hard for the community to understand that they could actually pray inside the school. We had parents say, the kids aren't supposed to be praying in school. We said, oh no, the Supreme Court's pretty clear. We can't lead the prayer, but we can create a safe space where they can pray and have adult supervision. We're just not leading the prayer. We're providing that safe space if we had it, right? So, it's I think what we try to do as educators is really look at Supreme Court rulings, and this is evolving, Title IX, all these issues around gender and what have you. I can't predict where it's leading exactly, but I think as school people, we've got to watch very carefully how the court system is guiding us on those issues, and then try to work with our community to say, look, this is the guidance we're being given, and we have to all try to understand these rulings, and we try to start from a kind of position of empathy and try to understand why, what's the justification, why are these things changing the way they are, and do our best to understand. I think it's a complicated issue. I don't know what it feels like to walk in those shoes and to be a transgender person, but I can imagine it's a very unique kind of experience. So I guess I'd stop there and just say my leadership would say, let's look at the way the courts are ruling on these issues. Let's get our guidance from that, because at the end of the day, that's the group that's going to have authority over these decisions.
Hi, good to see you again. So I am in a bit of a unique situation. So I am asking a question on behalf of our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. Today is one of the days of the Minnesota Indian Ed Conference, and so they weren't able to join today. So they've asked me to ask a question for you. So if selected as the next superintendent, can you share some of the initiatives that you plan to enact to better serve our underrepresented and diverse student populations, as well as the hiring of diverse staff members?
Well, the second one I think is something I want to talk about right away, which is, that's an area where I think every school district has got to work with real intention. Right? We've got to make sure that we are casting a broad net and that we are very aware of, and intentional in our efforts to recruit just a diverse workforce, a workforce that reflects our community, right? It's a lot easier to say than it is to do, because there's a lot of competition out there. Other school districts have the same goal, right? And so we have to be very skillful in telling our story about why this is where people want to work, right? And so I think that's an important conversation to have. Are they, when applicants look at a job posting here versus a neighboring school district, are we the district of choice? Are we the place they prefer to work? That's what we want to be able to say yes to. And if we're not appealing to a wide range of diverse backgrounds, then we're going to be in big trouble, because the pool of candidates is going to continue to shrink. We've got to be a welcoming school district where people want to be, number one. Now, the first part of the question was about what.
You want me to repeat again?
Would you just have
Absolutely. Some of the initiatives that you plan to enact to better serve our underrepresented and diverse student populations.
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to hear from the group what's happening right now. What are the initiatives or events or anything that are happening? Where do we see the gap? Where do people feel like there's not enough happening? What do the students this morning asked? Kind of a similar question, and I said, well, there's a lot of ways we can celebrate our diversity. It can be you've got a beautiful trophy rack back here. We're celebrating a lot of athletic success. That's a way we show what we're proud of, and so making sure everyone's represented in the artwork that we put on the walls. That within our curriculum, we're representing all different groups within our community. That's important. And that's not something we do just casually. We want our students to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, and so that might lead us to initiatives or events. But I think it's really important. I'm a part of the American Indian Parent Advisory Group in my school district because I'm a parent of a Native student. And when we meet, we actually talk about academic support and some of the things that our school district can do to point our kids to services that may help them be more successful in school. So there's a lot of things that our parent advisory groups can point at for us and help us. Sometimes it's about celebrating cultural history, but it can be other things as well. I think just working closely with all of our advisory groups and making sure their voices are heard, that we know where they think the gaps are, and that we're doing what we can to identify solutions to address those gaps.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Susanna Lemuskin. I've got 2 kids in elementary. Are you familiar with furries that have been in middle and high school?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, if selected as our superintendent, what are your plans in place to bring our district back to the basics and the policies that are in place against disruptive behaviors regarding the middle and high school students who are allowed to identify as animals, such as furries? They're allowed to meow their answers, hiss and bark at other students and staff, and other children have seen them cough up fur balls and rub up against things.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about this. I haven't dealt with it directly. What I can say is this: we have to be very clear that anything that's a disruption to the learning of others is not acceptable. Okay, and so some of the things you just described to me would fall into that category. So that's where draw the line as an educational leader, things that are disruptive to the learning environment. I'd have to spend some time with this problem and get to know it a little bit. I didn't have this when I was a principal, thank goodness. But again, I like to approach any problem by first learning about it and understanding it as best I can, and maybe talk to some of these kids who are exhibiting that behavior and try to understand what it is exactly. But I'm also very committed to the learning environment, and you cannot disrupt the learning for the student sitting next to you. And you do not have that right. And so that's where I personally draw the line. And again, I want to learn a little bit more and talk to these particular students, but the learning in the classroom cannot be disrupted.
I'm a parent who has had children go through the system, or through the school system. I am on the curriculum committee, so you were working with curriculum. With that, I've kind of got three questions. Last night we heard that 50% plus of all licensed teachers in the state of Minnesota are not teaching now. Why do you think that's happening? And you taught in a pretty tough school when you first got out of school. I'm here to tell you that's that. Plus, we've not talked about. We've just brushed finances with what Bob had asked. What differences do you bring on the whole finance and how we control? A lot of people don't think that the school district is a business. It's a big business. You pay people, you collect money. It's a business.
Absolutely.
And you have some business background in being your consulting. And then the third one is what would your curriculum involvement be? There's new standards that the state of Minnesota is now coming out with. And we're just starting to work through those things, and some of the stuff that I've read in the paper recently is a little scary about what's kind of happening. And I'll repeat these.
Yeah, good.
You had to remember them all, though.
So the second one was about business, the third one's about curriculum standards, and the first one again was about
Teachers. Why 50%
Yeah.
of licensed teachers are not teaching? Because there's a need for more teachers.
what's our job? And I think that is probably an understatement. And right now, going through COVID, it got twice as hard. So I think what you're seeing is the reality that there's a limit to what people can do. I think people would sometimes talk about how a certain percentage of teachers don't make it through the fifth year. Maybe this is your 50%.
That is.
And I'll say this from somebody who hired a lot of first-year teachers. Some of them, it was good to move out of the profession. They weren't suited to be a teacher. That's okay. That can happen. So it's not always a bad thing if somebody finds out that they ended up in the wrong profession. They need to make a change. So I want to leave some room for that, because I know some of those people, and they're great people, but they got in the wrong career path. So there's going to be some of that. But I also feel like when we're trying to create a healthy work environment for teachers, we have to pay attention to their needs, and we have to make sure that their experience in that environment, school, what have you, is a positive experience. We have to build a positive school work culture for those staff members. And those are things you have to do with intention as a principal. You have to create an environment where teachers feel appreciated, where teachers feel like they're not being given meaningless tasks and assignments to do, administrative, whatnot. That they're respected as professionals, and they're given the time that they need to do their job and do it well. And they're supported by their site leaders. So those are things you can't say about every school. And so part of it is on us as leaders to create a really healthy work environment for staff. So that's an area of emphasis. You know, there's, I don't know what the larger sort of aggregate data is on how many people start in one profession but don't finish there. They make moves, right? Who knows, right? So that number of 50% that leave teaching might match up with other professions, and we just don't know that. You know, I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that, again, you know, I had teachers come through as new teachers who told me after a year or two, I'm in the wrong field, and I said, you're right. There are some situations where we've got to create a better work environment for our staff so that they want to stay, they feel appreciated. It's probably a combination of those things, I would say. The second question is about school districts as businesses, and I couldn't agree with you more. You know, and part of, you know, as I've been studying Brainerd, and some of the folks here, I've talked about this already earlier today. When I look at the enrollment trajectory, I get concerned. I'm sure you do too. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't understand now. I understand that people left during COVID, some because of masking. But, you know, in a time where people can work more remotely, why wouldn't they be bringing their kids here versus elsewhere? I don't know. But that's a puzzle to me. I have a hard time understanding why 10 years ago there was a kindergarten class of 500 and now there's a kindergarten class of 400. That's a 20% drop in kindergarten enrollment. And that's a 13-year revenue impact, right? Because you're going to be 20% short every year for 13 years. And that's got to be a concern for not just the school board and the staff, but for the community. Because that's going to lead to serious budget reductions, staff cuts. The future's not bright if that enrollment trajectory is true. So that's what I would be curious about. What is it about this enrollment decline that we can fix? Because that's where we get to your point, that this is a business, that every student that enrolls here is a revenue stream that we need to pay attention to. And every 11th grader or 12th grader that drops out, that's a loss of revenue. Every family that chooses a private school instead of a public school, that's a loss of revenue. So you have to look at it like that. And in my opinion, everything that you do strategically should circle back to how is this benefiting our enrollment.
Just a thing on that, do you think that maybe that 20%, it has to do with decrease in population? Because in business, we've looked at, in the past, we've looked at, there's been a decrease in the numbers of births, is the best way to put it. And I don't know what that is in Crow County, maybe I would have more information on that, what the dynamic is on that. But maybe that's part of it, but then you have to adjust to that dynamic.
And I agree. I was on the Crow Wing County website myself last week. I was trying to figure it out. Because they track this data very closely, right? They know the number of births in the county. You can map your future enrollment based on those births. Now, people move in and out.
Right.
Of course they do. But that's data that you don't want to be guessing. You want to know, or at least some level of confidence. And then when you see an enrollment decline, you should be able to say, yeah, we saw this coming. We've been anticipating this. That's why we've made these changes, right? That's good business. Because you anticipate the market and you know how to move, right? So that's the part for me that's really a curiosity. I'm hoping that some of the changes in enrollment can be reversed. That folks who have chosen homeschool or chosen private school, we could convince them to take another look at the school district and come back. That to me is worth a good hard look. I'd like to talk to some of the families who've left. When I look this year compared to last year, just in K4, I count about 120 kids who aren't here. And that's a big number. That's 20-some at every grade level. So I'd want to talk to those parents and say, is it something we did? Is there something that we could do differently that would get you to come back? I think you have to take it personally. That's what a good business person does. They don't lose a customer and just say, oh, well. they wanna understand why they lost that customer, and they wanna see if there's something they can do to get them back. So, you know, it is a business, and that loss of revenue, let's just say that 20% loss from 10 years ago kindergarten to this year kindergarten, let's say that's a real drop. That's 13 years of 20% lost revenue. That's significant. And so, you know, these are, I'm sure you all are asking these questions, and I'm just, you know, I've been here for 5 minutes, but in my opinion, you know, this is a business, which it is. We should be anticipating those shifts, and we should be adjusting accordingly, because, you know, it's going to require some significant changes in the way we staff, in the way we program, etc. So I would 100% agree.
Curriculum.
And then curriculum, you know,
Because I think curriculum has something to do with that, with people going to private schools. So.
I hope you're wrong about that, but well, because here's what happens with curriculum. I mean, this is voted on by the state legislature. This isn't something that's casually done, and it's debated in the basement of the Capitol. I mean, there's a lot of debate and discussion that goes into that final draft that gets voted, and and if we don't like it, we're all responsible because we voted these people into office who make the decisions. So, you know, that's a tough one. You know, I will say this, that there is an element of local control here, right? You know, the standards are given to us, but not the curriculum. So we design the curriculum, we decide how to teach the standards, and that's important. That's local control, and you know, that's where we as a community come together to say, okay, these are the expectations. We have to teach to these standards, but how we do that is up to us. And you are on the committee, so I assume that that's something you all talk about. In my experience, you know, there's healthy debate when we do that locally. You know, I've certainly been in the middle of a number of those debates. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're a community. And you know, we've got to find some kind of common ground on the novels that we choose for our English classrooms, or the textbooks that we're going to choose for our social studies class. We've got to find common ground. And you know, at the end of the day, that's the job.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm Tyler Glam, I'm the Director of Economic Development for Crow Wing County, but also a parent of a couple of students here. You have had one of them with you today. I'm curious, you know, I'll get away from, and I'll more than likely ask a financial question a little bit later, but and you know, you had the opportunity to meet with the students today.
Yeah.
And our student leaders, and I'm proud that the school district puts those kids in front of you. What was that experience like for you today? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, and is there anything that you feel came out of that is maybe was surprising to you, or is something that you as potentially the next superintendent would take from that group of students, because these kids are truly the leaders of this school at this point?
Yeah, there's no question about it. You know, I mean, this is what's great about kids, is that they're going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I always would say when I was a high school principal, the best 30 minutes of the day was walking through the cafeteria, because I learned a lot in 30 minutes. So I'll say this. Yeah, these surfaced some pretty serious issues. And you know, it ranged from their concerns about excessive vandalism, about students mistreating each other, social media related issues, just a number of behaviors, things that were described in, you know, sometimes in detail, sometimes just generally, like there's bad things, feelings that they have. But yeah, I could tell from sort of the consistent line of questioning that these are very serious concerns. And, you know, I think there might be some work to do in areas around making sure it's a welcoming space for all kids. And just really work on that kind of culture side. That's really what I felt from the questions. Now, again, I don't want to overstep or say I think I know more than I do.
No. Yeah.
But there was a very consistent line of questioning around some kids not feeling included, some kids not feeling like the school is there for them. You know, identifying certain subgroups that feel like, you know, not welcome, etc.
Yeah.
So, you know, that line of questioning was pretty consistent and made me walk away thinking, yeah, there's pretty little work to do here. Not that work isn't needed at a lot of high schools.
For sure.
But you know, those are real issues, and kids, you know, when I was a high school principal, you know, it was a very strong anti-immigration, so my Hispanic families and students felt very threatened every day. I had to do a lot to make sure that those kids knew that was their school as much as anybody else's. And, you know, it was a lot of me putting my physical presence in places on campus where they needed to see the principal. So sometimes, you know, as leaders, we've got to put ourselves inside of those situations so that the kids know they're important. I know their names, just like I know the kids on the football team's names or everybody else. And, you know, they can tell from their leadership whether or not it's their school too.
Yeah, and you were in a, you know, obviously the school district in Napa, size-wise, you know, in that high school is roughly what this is, you know, student body-wise. You know, after talking with the students today, did you see similarities? Was there consistencies amongst, you know, because one of the things when we were involved in the focus groups was looking at this saying, really like to bring somebody in here that has had experience in a school system of this size.
Right.
And you've had that experience, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. I mean, the kids were great. I mean, I gotta say, you have great kids. I could tell right away. They were fun. There was a boy, Eli. Is that your boy?
Nope.
Okay. He came up to me afterwards and he said,
Mine went to told you
I made them all tell me their names. But this boy, Eli, came up to me after and said, what about snow days? And I said, the bomb. He was really disappointed.
I'm sure.
I really wanted to imagine when you were going to come back. But they're great kids. There was, I say there was some serious stuff. But there was also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. You know, for me, I mean, that's what drew me into this profession.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love, you know, finding ways to help kids reach their potential and creating great school environments where they feel really, you know, welcome, where they can do their best work. You know, when I was a high school principal, we worked so hard on 9th grade. And my message to the staff was, kids come on this campus and they feel right away like they're welcome. And the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders want them there. And if they see the teachers giving them that same kind of message, then they'll do their best learning right away, and it just goes north from there, right? And I'm a big believer in 9th grade success. So, you know, that was something. So we would get the 11th and 12th graders in. You know, we had Link Crew. Do you guys have Link Crew? I haven't asked that question. Link Crew? What's that? Yeah. Well, it's, you know, you could do it a lot of different ways, but essentially you have your 11th and 12th graders. They're the welcoming committee.
Yeah.
And so they form little groups with the kids when they come in, and you know, there's a lot you can do to convince your juniors and seniors that the way we become a great school is by welcoming our 9th graders like nobody else. And when you do that, it's amazing. When you watch your 9th graders and they're not walking around scared, they're actually feeling pretty good about themselves, and it shows up in their grades. It shows up in how they, you know, how they move to 10th grade. I mean, it's just, again, if you have a good 9th grade experience, the research is super clear. It continues on to 10th grade and so on and so forth. So, not that you mail it in from there on, you've got a lot of work to do with the upper grades to make sure it's engaging and relevant, but 9th grade is a critical year. And so, you know, I just, you know, I really enjoy taking that time with the kids there. I'm glad you guys included that.
Yeah.
For me, probably the highlight of the day. And I really loved the kids. There was a group that came up and sat right in front right away, and you know, I could just feel the good energy, and yeah. But I also could feel there was some hurt. You know, they were bringing up questions that reflected some pain that they were feeling. And as somebody who cares a lot about kids, I'd want to circle back on that.
Ken, I said the same thing last night, but this is more of a fun question, so to speak. You get to put your spin on it. But in today's atmosphere, with the different issues that can be divisive amongst things, but if selected as the new superintendent, what do you hope that your legacy or thumbprint would be on this community and this school when the time is for you to move on?
Well, I gotta say, I was reading these plaques up here, and Bob Gross, and I don't know Bob, but somebody wrote about Bob, an extraordinary leader who made commitment, a mission, and excellence a habit. When I read that, I said, put that on my plaque. You know, I think as a superintendent, what you want to try to create is a culture of excellence, where people really believe there's nothing our kids can't do, right? Like the sky's the limit. And we've created the environment where that can happen. Where literally anything they want to do, they can do. When I was looking at the newspaper this morning, I think the news anchor from KSTP, Miles, Jessica Miles, ring a bell?
Yeah.
She just left Brainerd High School, right? And I, you know, I've seen her on TV. I didn't know, but that's awesome. I mean, that's a great Brainerd graduate. You know, kids can graduate from here and do anything they want. And I think to create that kind of culture of excellence where people believe that and they know it's true because they see evidence of it. They watch graduates go and do amazing things. And we tell the stories of those kids to the kids coming through and say, you can do it too. You know, for me, that's what I would be most proud of is for someone to say that I helped create that kind of culture of excellence where people really believe that we have something special here. So that'd be, you know, when I read that, I thought that's pretty great.
Go ahead, Doug. Or was that you, Sue?
No, my hand's bigger. My
Oh.
hand's bigger.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
Eric, you've been in Brainerd all day,
Yeah.
and you kind of get a flavor of the type of people that we are.
Yeah.
What kind of commitment would we expect out of you?
Well, that's a great question. I would not be going anywhere. This is not a stepping stone kind of an opportunity for me. I'm really looking for a place where I can call home. You know, I'm coming back into public education, so I'm kind of homeless right now. And I'm looking for a school district where I feel like I can make a contribution. You know, and honestly, you know, when I saw that enrollment trend line and I started looking at that more closely, I thought, yeah, I am the perfect fit because I've done a lot of work on enrollment. You know, I spent some time today talking with different groups about how you have to be very intentional about your enrollment and be very strategic and it has to guide your planning. You know, I've done that work, and you know, I feel like if I were the superintendent in Brainerd and we'd be talking 3 or 4 years from now, and we could say, hey, look at that enrollment trend line, look at that, we're back up to 6,500, 6,600. You know, that would, maybe to somebody who doesn't understand the finances of school districts, wouldn't understand, but that's a game changer for this district. If we can get enrollment to trend back, that would make a big difference for kids here. And that would be something, you know, for me, and again, I spent a lot of years in Minnetonka watching how enrollment can be managed in a very intentional and strategic way. I would have never thought that I'd be standing here today with a community saying, hey, I think I have an idea for how to fix this enrollment issue. And again, I'd have to learn a lot more about what this trend is and understand it better, but I have a hunch that there are some things that we could do to bring families back, and that would be, for me, that would be really rewarding.
I had to tell you 2 more Twin City personalities that are Brainerd High School grads, and they're both in the Brainerd Hall of Fame,
Okay.
Distinguished Hall of Fame, but one is Kevin Doran, who's also at Channel 5 with Jessica. The other one is Kelly, and I can't remember his last name, but he's the guy that over the public address at the Vikings games, and he does all the Super Bowls
That's
for the
awesome.
National Football League.
There you go.
Yeah, so they were graduates, and
Love
yeah. I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh,
You know, we could have a career pathway in media personalities and broadcast.
I remembered now.
Yeah.
The obvious referendum has to happen. The CARES Act really gave the district a cushion until 2024. Yeah, even with the declining enrollment, it's it's still stable. But obviously, for that next school year, 24-25, it's gonna need some more money. And Dr. Han, when she was speaking to us yesterday, I might be off on this, but I thought she said at least half of the school districts in the state have a voter-approved $800 levy. If we had that $800, that would be about $5 million that would come back. So it would more than cover that, but also help us to get new programs. So are you intimidated by the fact that you're gonna have to do this as superintendent? With all that work, I know Lane did over 200 presentations on the bond referendum. And
I don't think there's a superintendent who doesn't understand that that's the job here. No, that's not the job in Iowa, because they don't operate the same way. But if you're a superintendent in Minnesota, you know you're gonna live or die based on your ability to pass a ballot question. And so at some point in your tenure, you're gonna be expected to do that. And if you don't, it's anybody's guess, right, what happens next. I think in 2007, after that, you closed 2 elementaries, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, it can be tragic if a superintendent can't get that ballot question to yes. It can have stark consequences. So, yeah, I get it, and I shouldn't be here today right now if I didn't understand that and ready to face that challenge.
yeah, you know, Brainerd is a lower income community, but it's a proud community, you know, and a lot of the people, there really hasn't been a turnover. Their parents worked at the shops or at the paper mill, and now, you know, they're the next generation and they've decided to stay here. Yeah, but most of the people in this community are passionate about public education and they take ownership in the school district.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that there is a science to passing a referendum, right? It's not a mystery. And it's about really understanding the voters and knowing exactly what their appetite is for additional tax dollars. And you know, there's a lot of work you do in the year or 2 years or maybe 3 years leading up to that ballot question. And you know, I think what you want to do is you want to stay within the comfort zone of your community, but you want the comfort zone of your community to stretch a little bit, right? And to get them to want to stretch a little bit means they have to really believe that this is going to add value to their lives and their community, right? In the 2017 survey, I saw very specific notes from the community saying, how will this construction work lead to employment pipelines from the schools into our businesses? So you know, you've got to keep that promise, right? If you accept those tax dollars, you have to go back and honor the promises you made. How are we doing on that? We've got to go to businesses and say, are we meeting your expectation there? And if we're not, we better get to work on that, because we're not going to get a yes on that operating levy if we haven't kept the promises from 2017, right? So, which I know people have worked really hard to do. The renovation has been very carefully done to make sure, you know, we're not tearing down buildings, we're improving them, right? That's what the community asked for. So if you stay close to what the community asks you to do, keep your promise, you circle back, you check in. Did we keep our promise? Yes. Okay. You know, surveying them, just finger on the pulse of what people are feeling. You know, again, we had a very, very thorough end of the year survey in Minnetonka that we, like I said earlier, that was how we built a lot of our goal setting for the fund, because we wanted the community to know we were listening very carefully. That's how you get yes on a levy question, right? Because the community knows that they've got a school district that's listening and acting on the interests and wishes of the community. They'll pay an extra $7 for that.
Yeah, I was in this room the night of the '07 referendum, and it was a tough one.
I can't imagine.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Heather Dunnick, parent and community member. I'd like to hear you talk just a little bit more about your leadership style, both with your colleagues, and then how you might perceive yourself as a leader in the community.
So, I think with my colleagues, you know, and I might have scared some people a little bit today because I talk a lot about goal setting. Because I really believe that's a big part of my approach to management. It's about working very closely with everybody in a leadership role to set goals for the year, right? To look at, you know, as an elementary principal, what do you need to be focused on? What does success look like for you this year, right? And so we're going to talk about reading scores. We're going to talk about math scores. We're going to talk about enrollment. We're going to look at every grade level and see, you know, what needs to happen here and there. We're going to talk about school culture. We're going to look at this parent survey from the spring and see what were parents saying specifically about your school. Let's set some goals there. You know, because you're not going to get improvement and progress if you're not really clear about how we're going to get there. And so today I've talked a lot about how I value that process, goal setting. Because I'll do that with the board as a superintendent. They're going to set goals for me, and I'm going to check in with them. How am I doing? And we're going to get to the end of the year, and they're going to give me a formal evaluation. Everybody deserves that, right? And clear goals that align with where we're trying to go as an organization. And the best part of it is when you reach that, we get to celebrate. You know, when you're successful in reaching those goals, that's a great feeling. And so as a manager of people, I like to give folks that opportunity to be successful, to know exactly what it looks like, not guess, not wonder, but to really know, and to be able to celebrate that with them. So for me, that's the role. I mean, a superintendent job is a lonely job. You talk about colleagues. I mean, you really don't have colleagues exactly, right? You have direct reports, and you have 6 bosses. So it's a strange kind of operation, but the way I approach my work supervising leaders is to have a very detailed goal setting protocol and to be very close to them throughout the year, checking in, how's it going, what do you need, that's the relationship. It's based on what is it that, how are you moving your part of the organization forward, and what support do you need from me to be successful? So, when we get into problem solving and dealing with some of the issues we talked about with the kids today, those are going to be situations where I'm going to want to sit down with the leaders and say, okay, there's some pretty complicated issues that the kids are surfacing. How are you all kind of navigating this, and what support do you need, or what do you see as the solutions going forward? What's your conversation like with the community on these issues, or the larger student population? So I want to get to know the problems that as they surface and work and support leaders, but I want to also I don't want to make the decisions for them either. I want them to have autonomy and authority to make decisions in their areas of expertise. But I consider myself to be a pretty hands-on leader, somebody who stays close to my direct reports, and I care about their success, and I want to see them be successful and feel good about the job they're doing. So, I think in there is, I'm a collaborative person. I've learned, fortunately, that I don't have all the answers. In fact, the answers are probably somewhere out in the room here. But if you come in thinking that you have the answers because you have a position of authority, you're going to miss out on a lot of great solutions. So, luckily I've learned that I don't have all the answers. But engaging in the conversation, making sure that the right conversations are happening, those are all part of my leadership style.
And in the community?
Yeah. Well, I think, like I talked a little bit about, how I really value getting input, survey instruments and things like that, so that you get a kind of an aggregate, view of the community and what their issues are. But I think it's also about, building relationships in the community and, hearing anecdotally, from people what their experiences are like. That's really important. The Friday night football game, you're going to learn a lot from parents. They're going to walk up to you and they're going to share something that they're experiencing. So, you've got to be out in those spaces where the community is to hear that information. much rather hear about it there than in an angry email on Monday or Tuesday. So if I can hear it out in the community and be able to put some attention to it quickly, I'd rather do it that way.
Yeah, hi, I'm Laura. I have 3 students in the district, and I guess I'm here because I'm very worried about the drop or the gap since the pandemic has hit in my kids' education. And kind of in correlation with that is, you know, the expectations seem to have dropped. It's kind of like, well, if you get the assignment done by the end of the semester, that'll be fine. We'll give you a 75% credit. That, you know, I see my son as being like, it's not that important. There's not really a deadline. And so in conjunction with, in conjunction with that, I've seen kind of mid-year, there was additional days off of school added due to teachers needing more of a mental health leave. And so what kind of correlation that is, and what do we do to improve the expectations and the academic success for kids?
Yeah, this is a great question. And you know, school districts all across the country, probably the world, are having this exact conversation. And I think we've done it the right way by coming back from COVID with a little bit of a gentle approach, because kids are still, I think, a little bit fragile. The question is, at what point do we start to turn the dial and get back to our, you know, firm expectations and you know, kind of really building that academic environment that we had before COVID. So I think the answer is we're there. You know, that we're at that point now where we have to start turning the dial. And we have to, you know, it's not, we don't want to just flip the switch, but we want to turn the dial and gradually, you know, working with teachers to say, okay, you know, and I can tell you this, I've seen some teachers that have gone all the way back to, you know, full speed. And that's hard too. So we have to do it together. And I think as principal, building leaders, really working with teachers to say, okay, what's the right level of expectation, knowing that we've got to turn that dial back to full speed. And you know, I would hope that we're getting there to the end of the school year, and that we are able to start next school year back to our full, what I would consider, you know, rigorous academic expectations. I don't know. I mean, I'd be open to other thoughts on that, but that's my read on kind of where I think kids are and teachers are and schools are right now. I think we're coming back, bringing to the end of the school year to get to what we remember.
Do you see there being a correlation between maybe the relaxed expectations and maybe the challenges that the teachers have had that have necessitated their additional time off, which I can appreciate and I understand that that also puts another barrier on those parents who have dealt with the pandemic, full-time work and the adjustments of school and such. So that has been a struggle for my family.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's you're not alone. It's a feeling of struggle for a lot of families, and I feel like, you know, we've talked a little bit about teachers being stressed and, you know, tilting on the brink of quitting. So, you know, we're trying to manage all these really fragile situations. So, you know, appreciate you sharing that and just knowing that you're being heard. You know, that and this is absolutely happening everywhere. Everybody I know in educational leadership is struggling with this exact question. Where should we be in getting back to our rigorous expectations? And I do think we're getting closer around there, but I would hope that by the end of this year we're there. We get summer vacation. Heaven help us if another wave comes through, and you know, I have to regret saying all this.
Yeah.
But I do think we're on that kind of a trajectory. We'd go away for the summer, come back in the fall, and be as close to full speed as we could hope. That'd be my hope.
Thank you.
Want the last one again, Tyler? Or
I can. I'll give it to you tonight.
No, I don't have the last one. I've got 2 left in on my thing.
Very good.
In regards to the growing interest in the curriculum transparency piece that parents are starting to ask for more and more, I think partly because of COVID, they started to see what was coming home and being taught virtually, that made those questions available. On the spectrum, I guess, from no transparency to every lesson plan being listed on each teacher's site, where would you feel comfortable, or what level of transparency does a parent entitled to?
Well, I gotta say, I like what Tim's got going right now. I've been on the website, I've looked at all the curriculum maps, and I think what I see right there is what I would consider to be as good, or probably better than most school districts. And I was really impressed. And I would be curious, I'd love to have a conversation with a parent who didn't think that was good enough, because I think it's pretty good. There's obviously a lot more behind those maps that, you know, a lot more detail, like you say, lesson plans, etc. But, you know, I think what's there is really quite impressive. I can tell you a lot of very high-performing school districts that don't have what Brainerd has, so that's a credit to Tim and his team. So, you know, I'd be interested to have that conversation with community members or parents who didn't think that was good enough. Because I could point you to a lot of districts and you're in a better spot.
If selected as our superintendent, what plans do you have or would you put in place to offer more support to our teachers? We know across the country, but specifically here, they are overwhelmed, they are stressed, especially like in the elementary classes.
Right. Well, yeah, we talked about this quite a bit when I was with the teachers a little bit ago, and it's real. They feel a lot of strain from the last couple of years. My answer would be, and this is what I said to them, I feel like what we really have to focus on is sort of creating an environment of gratitude and appreciation, and really making sure that we're taking every opportunity to recognize teachers for the work that they're doing, and not just in a kind of lip service way, but to really see it in the moment and recognize it and talk about it. You know, teachers are amazing people, and they're not motivated by a lot of external things, but appreciation and gratitude go a long way when you're doing the kind of work that teachers do every day. So I'd be looking for ways, not just the principals or district leaders, but all of us in the community to have opportunities to be recognizing teachers. I know you all have the above and beyond coming where teachers, there's some recognition happening there, but even the small ways of recognizing teachers, I think go an awful long way too. So I would just really explore those opportunities.
Can I ask a final question before others?
You get the semi-final question.
Yeah. Lead up to the final question.
We didn't talk about this last night, but superintendents really have the most stressful job in education. And I know every job is difficult within education. The teachers are under tremendous pressure. But as a school board member, a former school board member, I was always concerned about the mental health of the superintendent. How will you deal with that? Because you're coming from the Twin Cities into this smaller community. You're well qualified. You get all the checks.
Yeah.
But how are you going to take care of yourself so you don't burn out?
I don't even know that.
Yeah, show them your socks.
Right.
Did you see his socks?
I didn't.
My kids always pick my socks out.
Oh, yeah. Got a lot of
I'm an avid cyclist, so that's a way for me to get, because it's true, you need to have that outlet,
Yeah.
right? My golf game needs some work. If you're patient.
Yep.
I like to say I get the most for my money when I go golfing. But what I would say is this. When I was a high school principal, people would all the time say to me, it's like, oh, I don't know how you do it. I wouldn't want your job. It's crazy, everything. And I'd say, wow, I'm glad you want my job because I love my job and I don't want anyone taking it away from me. So I feel like it's people who go into these roles, high school principal, superintendent, what have you, they know what they're walking into, right? It's kind of like the question about passing an operating levy. It's like, you have to know that's the job, right? And so, I've worked for some amazing superintendents. I feel like I've been really blessed. to have had great role models. I've learned a lot. In 30 years, I've I think absorbed a lot of really good tips and tricks. You know, I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like I had, you know, internally what I need to stay healthy and be a balanced, you know, good leader. But you know, it's always nice when people worry about you and say, you know, you doing okay, and you know, hey, I was a tough meeting last night, and you know, you want to go get lunch. You know, there's a lot we can do, right, to kind of take the pressure off from each other, and I think those are good things. I mean, I don't ever want to pretend like I don't feel the pain when something, you know, hard happens. So I think we can take care of each other in those ways, and I've always had people who've done that for me, and I've always appreciated it. You know, when I was a principal, there were a couple of retired principals in the community who would do that. They just stop by and say, "Come, we're out for lunch," you know, and just give you someone you can talk to, right? I remember once I said to him, because I was kind of tangling with my varsity football coach, and he was giving me some heartache, and this retired principal said to me, "Well, you know, if you, what he's upset about with you is, you know, he's telling you that you're not supporting him enough, but what he's really telling you is you're not letting him do what he wants to do." And he said, "That's your job. You know, your job is to keep the guardrails on. You know, you can't chew tobacco on the practice field. No, you can't. You know, there are guardrails here." And so, you know, I think it's nice to have people who take care of you as a leader, who come along and say, "Let me take you out for lunch," and you know, or I jump on the bike, or you know, Tyler takes me golfing and is kind about it. But it's, you know, I think we all have to find those things that help us release the stress. You know, it's a stressful job. You know, I'm not going to argue.
Well, the reason I asked, it was a statement you made, which is superintendent has the loneliest job in the world, other than the Maytag repairman. Remember those commercials? But it is lonely, and when I was the chair or the vice chair, you know, you get a lot closer to the superintendent because you meet a lot more. And there were some tough things.
You know what's great about superintendents, though, is they just pick up the phone and they call each other. Yeah, you know, that's like in my letters of recommendation. I've got 2 superintendents in there. They're really dear friends of mine, and you know, it's like because you're dealing with similar issues, right, from one school community to another, and so you can really talk to each other, and it's safe. So that's one outlet that you really have to take advantage of.
I think we better go with the final.
Eli's not the only one that wants snow days back. I'm just saying.
Who's the spokesperson?
He may have, I got a couple in my house that would take those snow days back as well. But no, it's more of a, you know, this community, this board, you know, definitely has given all of us a show place. You know, this new school, the new schools, everything that they've done in every community throughout, you know, the district is truly a show place. You know, and we're extremely proud of that. It's from a recruitment standpoint and us bringing businesses here, bringing individuals here. This is where we bring people. This is one of our stops, is to say, you need to see our school district. You need to see the things that they have done in the past and how well they've done with it. You know, the elementary schools have blue ribbon, or you know, blue ribbon accreditation for those schools, and they've done. It's been fantastic. We chose this school district for the educational opportunities that are available for our children. Knowing that, and knowing that the challenges that are in front of you, and knowing that there's, you know, operating referendums that are coming forward. And my daughter texted me this after she met with you today too, so that's part of this question. And I asked this last night: would this be your last job? And I know that was already asked, but knowing what you have in front of you, you know, I would imagine, you know, these folks, you know, went through this, but this is a very attractive job. It really is, and you know. Looking at it from that lens and coming back into education, would this be it for you?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, there's no question for me. You know, it's where I'm at in my life. Yeah, I don't see another stepping stone opportunity. That's not where I'm at in my life. And you know, I'll tell you that. coming through COVID, I suppose we all had our own experience going through that, but my wife and I, we just want to go camp, we just want to be outside, and it kind of changed us. It made us slow down as a family, come together a little bit more, and just to be in nature, I think it changed us a little bit, and so, when I talked to her about this opportunity, that's the first thing we both thought, let's continue this move away from the craziness of the city and all of that, and get to a more humane kind of lifestyle and pace. And not that this would be a slow-paced job if I were in it, it'd be busy, but there's a lot to be said for what you all have here. This region of the state is, it's all by itself a showpiece, right? And now the improvement to the facilities, you've got a lot to offer as an employer, trying to recruit new employees out there, right? So, and I think the next thing we need is just to be able to show them academic programming and outcomes that show that kind of culture of excellence. I think for me, that would be the focus.
So with that, you got a couple closing comments perhaps, and we'll wrap up.
Right. There is probably one wrinkle that we have to work out if you want to offer me this job, and that is there's no French program at the high school.
I was going to ask that question.
I mentioned that our teaches French, so we have to build something into the contract.
There was back in the day.
See?
Yes, there was.
We need to get back to the day. But
In all aspects. Get back to back in the day.
so I just joking aside, that is the place I'm at in my life, and with my kids going off to college and really looking for a change as a family. This is a perfect opportunity. Now, I'm not delusional, right? I'm an outsider. I'm not known by the community. You've got an internal candidate. You've got a 12-year sitting superintendent that I'm up against. So, I think what I bring is fresh ideas. I bring, a set of experiences that I think are going to be unique compared to other candidates. And I have a real passion for this work. I care a lot about schools, and I've been in 4 different school districts, and so I can tell you that you can care about every different school community that you're in. It doesn't have to be one and then the others aren't the same. You can care about each one, and I have. Every time I've been in a community, that's the community that I care about. And if this could be the kind of final chapter of my professional journey, that would be fantastic. Again, your board has a hard decision to make, and luckily they've got 3 great candidates. These guys have brought a good group forward, and I'm honestly honored to be a part of it, truly. So I've enjoyed studying Brainerd. I've learned more about it in the last few weeks than I ever thought I would. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a joy. I love meeting the kids. I've met a lot of folks today, and I'll definitely go away having a good memory of Brainerd, and I'll always be really rooting for you guys. I know there's some enrollment issues we talked about, some things that need to turn around, but I'll absolutely be rooting for you guys and feel a little connection. So I'll be watching you guys from afar.
Well, again, the board really appreciates your involvement, and hopefully we'll see you all back here tomorrow. And those feedback forms filled out, and then board's final interview with Eric will be back in the room at 7:30. Some more.